Welcome to Sidestreets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. I am your host, Angela Champ, and in the studio with me today we have no other than the one and only, let's hear, woo, Mr. Elvis Slaughter. Now, before we get started, let me just remind you, for those who are out there looking for an opportunity to host your own show here on IntellectualRadio.com, please do not hesitate to call 708-223-8953. Welcome. So, Mr. Slaughter, before we get started, just kind of tell the people who you are and how we had come to know one another.
Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me to your show, Angela.
Very welcome.
I met you, I think, about 15 to 18 years ago at the Sheriff Department.
Yes.
I haven't seen you in 10 years.
Absolutely.
Just so happened you found me on LinkedIn in March.
Yes.
And we sort of like reconnected. And you still the champ I used to know.
Thank you. Like the challenge is the champ. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'm really excited that since you've retired from the Sheriff's Department, you have gone on to do some phenomenal things. Particularly, we want to focus on you are now an author. And let's talk about that. What inspired you to write? And what is it that your take, what the perception is that what you're trying to press upon people?
Well, I wrote my first book in 2006. The title of that book is Ghost of Hollandale. It was updated and renamed American Genocide, and I since did a condensed version of that book. It's titled Epiphany of Sin. The reason I wrote that book, it was because what happened to my mother. She received a botched blood transfusion from South Shore Hospital in Columbus, and as a result of the tainted blood, she passed away. And so I did an investigation and found out not only that my mom, but thousands of other individuals from Chicago also received tainted blood transfusion. So I put my investigation into a book, and this was like in 2006. And that's what got me into writing.
Wow. Amazing. Well, you and I actually met and had coffee to discuss your coming here to the studio on today. And you gave me a copy of one of your books that's entitled Safer Jail and Prison Matters: Effective Ways to Manage and Reduce Violence in Correctional Facilities. And for a person who still works in the environment, I think that your writing is much needed. It needs to be utilized. And it's imperative that the lessons that you leave here in this book serve as a framework to reduce violence in correctional settings. And so have you reached out to various institutions to say, hey, here's a framework that I think will work?
Oh, yes. I have reached out to my prior employer, numerous institutions around the country. I have received positive feedback. I have contacted national correctional magazines, and one is publishing an article next month. The books are selling, and I'm getting good response from the books.
Now let's just get right into it. Let's get right into it. On page 49,
okay.
For those that don't work in correctional facilities and jail settings, a lot of times we want to give you kind of an insight as to the life that an officer lives in this environment. And I think it's imperative because now you get to understand our walk. Sometimes not just understanding the walk of your loved one, but the walk of your loved one that works in that environment is also, it gives you a greater understanding as to what we face. Now, on page 49, you talk about movement of detainees. And we're going to go to the bottom of the page where it says that movement patterns should be unpredictable and centrally controlled. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yes. When you, it also depends on the type of movement. If you have set routes, like at the sheriff department, there's not too much room for changing those routes, especially if you go into court or if you go into a health facility. You don't have much changes. But what you can do is the time that you take those routes. So as long as it's not predictable and the detainees don't know exactly when you're going to make those routes, that's is very imperative. Changing the routes is very, very difficult because there's only one route, when you travel through the tunnel or whatever way you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And can you just, without giving too much away, the purpose and why that these strategies or methodologies are put in place is not only for the safety of those that work there, but for those that are entrusted to the Department of Corrections or IDOC or any other facility that houses pretrial and or detainees.
Well, this book, when it was written, is based on research. If you look in the back of the book, there's 100 of citation and reference from research. So it's based on many facilities around the country. So it's not particularly relates to DOC at Cook County. It relates to facility all over. The most important thing is safety. Safety of staff, inmates, and the public. Those are the three main things when you're dealing with public safety. When you're dealing with transporting inmates, a lot of times, how are you transporting these inmates? There should be some procedures set place, procedures that are ironclad, whereas there's little room for mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. What we're going to do, we're going to go to a musical break, and then we're going to return back to Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com as we talk about safer jail and prison matters with our special guest, Mr. Elvis Slaughter. back to Sidestreets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. I am your host, Angela Champ, and once again, if you are looking for an opportunity to host your own show here on IntellectualRadio.com, please do not hesitate to call 708-223-8953. And just as a reminder, we are an iHeartRadio station. So getting back to my special guest, Mr. Elvis Slaughter. He was you retired as a former superintendent. And just let's talk about the work that goes into being a superintendent, because I don't think sometimes we don't understand what it entails. The sleepless nights, the late calls, the being on call. So let's talk about that just a little bit.
Well, you're a manager and you're part of the executive team. When you're on a team, certain things are expected from you. You have to be what you call a team player. As a team player, you have to be committed to making sure that the facility is managed properly and everyone is safe, including staff, inmates, and visitors. When ensuring that those things are met, those goals are met, it can be challenging at times, especially when you short of staff. During holidays, individuals love to take off, or when you get detainees who are challenging, have mental issues, or are very aggressive. And like you said, when you get those calls 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, where you have an emergency where you have to get up and report, then you go back home, try to get some sleep, and that take a toll on you after a while. But you have to be committed. So I received my master's in criminal justice in 1990. So I learned a lot about management when I was an officer. I learned a great deal about how to manage detainees, how to manage people. I wasn't perfect, and I learned when I became a sergeant, everything was, it's a learning period. Then I became a lieutenant. That was a learning period. Then I became a captain. That was a learning period. Then I was promoted to superintendent. So what I did, I was one of those lucky individuals who was able to take all of those years of experience, 20-some years of experience, and work in those different ranks along with education. And I also would member organizations such as the Illinois Academy of Criminology, had the chance to sit and socialize with police chiefs, college professors who I became good friends with, had the opportunity to go to ACA, which is American Corrections Association conferences. All this was done while I was an officer. So, and also I took advantage of quite a few books. One book, The 7 Habits of the Most Effective People, that kind of like trained me on how to be an effective manager. Like I said, I wasn't perfect. I have every day you learn something. There's another book, The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. And there's another book, The Magic of Believing. So I took all of those, I would say, teachers, along with my experience in education. And that is what allowed me to, when I had my calling, to be able to be as effective as I were in my position. It made my job a whole lot easier to do because I was more or less prepared for the position. So yes, it was challenging, but at the same time, I began to enjoy what I did, because when you look at the statistics on making things better, such as reducing violence, reducing fights, reducing incident, by applying research-based evidence, things that I learned, you see that these things really worked. And that's what kind of sort of inspired me to write this book, because these things actually work.
Now let's talk about, you talk about the training that you sought out yourself,
Yes.
so that you would become more proficient, and that also you would be beneficial to those whom you were supervising.
Yes.
As well as those detainees that you were responsible for, sometimes 1,600 at one time that you were responsible for.
At one time I had 2 divisions.
2 divisions. But I think what you really point out in your book is you talk about leadership and how when leadership is ineffective, this is when you have a lot of the problems that arise. And so can you talk about also how true leaders must learn to set aside their personal feelings and focus on the task at hand, because sometimes that clouds their judgment with respect to those that work for them and those that are in their care.
Well, effective leadership is a critical factor that determines the success of every organization. And this includes correctional facilities. Most problems and challenges that correctional institutions face can be resolved with good leadership. Considering the increasing challenges in facing correctional institutions, officers need to be well trained, mentored, and to enable them to deal with new challenges, as well as achieve the primary goal of the agency, which is to ensure the safety of staff, inmates, and society. And this is a quote from John Maxwell. The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, but true leaders adjust to the cells.
Absolutely. And I also want to, in your book, you quote Boyer 2004. You said one of the most critical challenges facing criminal justice professionals today and in the future is the availability, recruitment, and retention of qualified, diverse workforce.
And that's the problem with most organizations. That's the problem with Chicago Police. They was lucky enough to have 16,000 applicants. How they pull that one off, I don't know. That's something. That's a lesson to learn. I noticed that even in some of the suburbs that are heavy minority populated, they have a large, small minority on their force. What I have learned is that if you want to increase the minorities, you have to recruit them. As simple as that. You have to advertise. You have to, in other words, that you have to show the department. You got to put the department, a good face on the department, make people want to say, hey, look, I want to come and work for that department because I love what they do. So you have to put a good face on the department. You have to showcase yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's including the staffs too.
Absolutely.
There have to be, everyone had to be on board, not just management making the department look good. It goes from the officers to the sergeants, the lieutenants, the commanders. Everyone has to be on board with this. So you have to showcase yourself to make people want to be part of that organization. But at the same time, you have to recruit. Recruitment.
And so when you
have to target minorities.
So when you talk about recruitment and you talk about effective leadership, you would think that one would go hand in hand, but it appears to me in my years of working in the environment that in some ways that has since been lost. I think that it's one thing to tell individuals who work up under your command to do A, B, C, or D, but it's another thing to not only tell them, but then to, if they don't know how to do it, to follow up. And if there are corrections that need to be made, they're not done in a fashion that causes some form of embarrassment upon the employee, but that the learning is conducive so that everybody benefits from the mistake. And I think that having worked up under your leadership, there were times when you and I didn't particularly see eye to eye.
It's quite a few times.
However,
but we did coexist.
We did coexist. And I think that if I never had the opportunity to thank you, I want to thank you for having worked up under your
I
leadership.
appreciate that.
Because the one thing that I can say, having worked up under your leadership, because you all are not just watching us, but we're paying attention to you, is that even though you may have heard things that were said, and there are a lot of things that are said about the people that work up under your command, you formulated your own ideals about those that you worked under you. And you extracted the qualities so that it would work for the better of the whole good. And you set aside your personal feelings. And I think that very few can accomplish what you were able to do.
I appreciate it. And you know what? You're absolutely correct. I put one thing I did, when I came to work, I left my family issues at home. And when I went home, I left work at home. So I have to make sure that when I'm at work, my goal is to give it 100%. And when I manage, and I like the way you put it, I sort of like think of myself as like a football coach trying to take his team to the Super Bowl. And so I try to manage people and put them in the right place where I know they're gonna make the operation look good. I try to put people in a place where they cannot hurt the operation. And when you learn the people, what they can and cannot do, it become a lot easier. If I was put in a division, I didn't know anyone, that'd be pretty tough. But what you have to do, you have to learn people. And I remember years ago, when people used to spread rumors all the time.
Yes.
And I had to be guilty of this. I found a person who was spreading the rumors, and I went to him and said, "Hey, you know what? I just heard I'm gonna get promoted." And within 10 minutes, I got a phone call congratulating me on getting promoted. I wasn't getting promoted, and it was just like a test.
Absolutely.
And, and I was surprised how things,
get out of whack
so quickly. And so I took that as a learning experience. I don't spread rumors. I just take things as they are, and treat people fairly. I mean, like I say, coming up, you have to learn. There was some bumpy roads in certain divisions, but what they did to me at the county over the years, they used to place me in divisions where I would assume they had issues and they need somebody to fix things. And I didn't realize that until maybe when I was a lieutenant. And as I look back, everywhere I went, there was progress. And I guess that from what I told you earlier, from my experience getting my degrees and training. And so I was actually applying what I have learned from my experiences, conferences, college and whatnot. And it actually worked. And like I said, I appreciate, what you said. You don't really know yourself until someone tell you about yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that when I say that, it's not based on a rumor mill, like you said earlier. It's based on observation. It's based on being fair and equitable in how you issue discipline and or correction, and or simply sometimes a compliment. And not in the sense that I feel like you're just saying this just to get me to do something, but you sincerely, it comes from a place of sincerity. And I think that a lot could be learned, not just from what you've written over the years, but a lot can be learned from your style. And it's amazing that here we are 10 years in the future and we're sitting here today, because there are those that have come across my path that I believe that I have impacted significantly, and that they've also impacted me. And what's interesting is that we would always have conversations about leadership. And I'm just a firm believer that where greed is the guiding force, integrity cannot be found. And I think so often that people are put in positions of leadership when they haven't even defined what leadership is. And so it is a continuous process. It requires much education. You can't learn it in 2 or 3 days. It really is a lifetime of education. And it also requires that you hear those sometimes very unfavorable things that gives you a true assessment of who others may perceive you to be and who you want people to believe you are. So let's get back to your book. On page 9, you talk about improving employee morale. And you say that effective leadership and management will require great managers, and I stress great managers, to engage employees. And in order to effectively do so, it is necessary to first understand what it is important to the employees in order for them to be effective in their roles. Now, you talk about data which was obtained from a Gallup organization poll survey, national survey. And one of the least expensive ways of achieving organizational success is for managers to carry out a survey of staff and act on the results of the survey. So what happens when an institution is afraid to hear the ugly truth?
Is that the question for me?
Yes. So what happens when an institution is afraid to hear the ugly truth?
Well, I can't say I have an answer for that. I have been retired almost 8 years, so I don't know what's really, going on. But I know that if you take those steps to see what's the needs of the employees are, opportunity to find out some of the cure to some of the problems that you might be having. If you go to like the last chapter in the book, it talks about effective ways to manage a jail, and one of the critical points in that section is when you take over a jail or prison, one of the first things you do is try to make all the employees stakeholders. In other words, that try to meet with all of them and find out what their concerns are, pros and cons, and try to find a way to deal with those.
Absolutely.
That's how you kind of like find out the mindset of your people. If you don't know the mindset of your people, you don't know when you throw that football and you try and get a touchdown, you don't know who to throw it to. And so you can have, there are going to be some issues there, and those you might call them coaching issues, but, there could be, your officer issues too, because whoever trying to catch the ball don't know how to catch and don't know where to go for the ball. So that, it could be a lot of confusion there.
Absolutely.
And so basically, I don't begrudge anyone, of my, prior employer, but I would say that, if are some issues, you always got to look at the top first.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I don't know if there's any issues.
Absolutely.
I've been going for years.
Yes.
But if there are issues, you always look at the top first.
Absolutely.
And you work your way at the bottom.
Absolutely.
And if I were given an opportunity, which I would probably say no, but if I was ever in a position to say, okay, I need you to manage this jail or prison, I would have to make sure I bring in my own team.
Ooh, you said a mouthful there.
Well, I'm just saying that's one you have to bring your own team.
Absolutely.
And you have to make sure they're on your team and you're all on the same page.
Absolutely.
In addition to, working with the employees there. Another thing I would probably do is make sure I would attend every roll call and put the mission and make sure the mission is heard from all the employees, from the leadership itself. And that way I would have not only the officer, the sergeant, lieutenant, everybody know what the mission is, and we all going to be on the same page. And as we move down this road, make adjustments as you go along. I mean, some people, it's just like being a coach, taking your team to the Super Bowl. Something you got to make changes. You got to trade people. You got, if you're going to get to that Super Bowl, you can't go in there, let's say, for example, Chicago Bulls. There's no one in the world they're going to win the championship this year. I mean, Vegas want to bet on that. But if they had the right people in the Michael Jordan era, the right coach, the right general manager, you could see that team going to the Super Bowl year after year. So like I say, running a jail is not like coaching a football team. The jail is very complex. It's like you got a box, it's like a box with a lot of criminals in it, and you're trying to manage these individuals. And it's very difficult. And so if you don't have the right tools, resources to manage, thousands of criminals, your job gets tougher and tougher.
Absolutely. And on page 181 of your book entitled Safer Jail and Prison Matters, you talk about how it is very important, not just as part of an interview process is where one would begin in order to recruit, but these are skills that can be utilized every day in management, that one must listen effectively, select your team.
That's what I said.
Acknowledge what you do not know. So for all you managers out there, all of you supervisors, all of you people that have decided that leadership is where you want to be, but you have not mastered these skills, I suggest that you, one, go buy the book, and two, take a critical assessment of your emotional intelligence. Also, you said you must listen to people who disagree. And let me just read this. It says, it is important to listen to individuals who challenge your assumptions, not punish them, but challenge your assumptions. You will be able to get more information needed to make a balanced decision. Can you just expound on that just a little bit for me?
You said enough, but go to the next one. Clean the house.
Clean the house if you have to.
And what else?
And appreciate your predecessor.
And what else?
Make mistakes, but fix them fast. And I actually made a notation, and I said, good thing to remember. Make mistakes, but fix them fast. And in making mistakes does not necessarily mean that punishment should follow.
You also have to add that in this the last chapter 19, there's also like a 30, a 60, and a 90-day strategy as well. So let's say, for example, if you or you going to a jail or prison somewhere else outside of the county, there are some strategies here that you could actually use. We have individuals that, jailed and prisons, and they use similar strategies. They did exceptionally well. But at the same time, this book has so much resources in it that you wouldn't believe that, this book, this was like, it's like a correctional playbook.
Yes.
It has so much. Before this book was published, one of my consultants said, man, you should list that book for like $30. I said, no. So it's only $15. But he's saying that you're giving away too much stuff for free. I said, well, people actually need this stuff. So I know, it's hard to get folks to read now. So I'm not going to charge them $30 for something they're not going to read.
Absolutely.
So that's why I kept the price down. But like I say, this book is a great resource, and I strongly encourage, not only managers but officers. I mean, if an officer take this book and read it from front to back several times, he would be a game changer. He would be ahead of his game.
Well, one thing that I took, like I said, I went through the book and I began to make markings, and I started to say,
it's your book, go ahead.
It's my book. Absolutely. You gave me my own signed book. And on page 182, it says, while interacting with the staff of correctional facilities. Managers should learn to showcase their values, and the reasons behind every decision that they make, their priorities, and the method of evaluation of the performance of correctional staff individually and collectively as a team. Now, the reason I'm bringing this point out is because so often when assessments come around, if and when they do come around, everyone gets the same score. And I've learned from my own training outside in the world of academia that the reason that everyone gets the same score, because then they would be entitled to a raise, and you would have to justify that raise if in fact you gave them a score higher than what the organization set forth as passing.
Okay.
Can you talk about that just a little bit? And how this can be a deterrent when in fact that you have individuals who have started off maybe in their 20s working at an institution, they've educated themselves, they've gotten degrees that they can now make applicable to this environment, and yet they're still hindered.
So are we talking about an evaluation?
Yes, an evaluation of sorts.
Okay, and what type of evaluation?
So we're talking about an evaluation of performance.
Okay.
Just talk about.
Well, I remember years ago, I used to get 100 on my evaluations. Reason why is because I met all the benchmarks, what you might call criteria. I had a master's degree in criminal justice corrections. I was getting 98 until I got them 2 extra points. I had the seniority, I had no disciplinary in my record, and I had the education. And one day they changed the criteria. It became a complex type of system. In other words, is that I guess they want to see, and they do this in the educational field too. They want to see more of you rather than have everything just cut and dry. In other words, that me being able to get 100, I enjoyed getting that 100, but at the same time, when they changed the evaluation, of course, I was a little annoyed at it and got a little bit upset. But at the same time, I understood it too. But it still did not stop me personally from progressing.
Absolutely.
Right. And so if anyone ever feel that their evaluation is keeping them from progressing in a profession, they need to take a look at everything that is notated on why their scores are not meeting certain benchmarks. In other words, that you have to make sure that your employer 100%. If you know, I try to give 110%, even though it might have been 80%, but I always fought for 110%. You can't give 100% every day. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes when you're dealing with evaluation, I'm the one that you might be having a conjecture about. I can't really say because it's not in front of me, so I can't, making a statement. But I'm personally making a statement about myself and my prior evaluations. Are they fair? When I got one evaluation a couple of years ago from the school, it was a good evaluation, but what the supervisor said was that, well, I can't give you a perfect one because then I can't give you a better one next year. So I didn't understand that.
Overplay for the
so
underplay.
I like the one when I was there, I knew I could get 100.
Absolutely.
So like I say, if you feel that your evaluation is not right, you should challenge it.
So what happens when an institution does not utilize the tools to make such evaluations, rather than using a standard, a guideline, a framework that should have been put in place? They're interjecting their own personal feelings. How does one get around such a complex organization like that?
Well,
or can you get around in an organization as such?
I think it depends when you say get around. You mean like manipulate the system?
Well, I don't want to use the word manipulate because that sounds like you're doing something that you're not supposed to. However, what I'm saying is so many workers.
What do you mean low level? That
Okay.
doesn't sound good.
It doesn't sound good, but let's
You mean
say,
like
for example,
lower level?
okay, so they're not in management.
Okay, not in management. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And
because everyone has a value.
absolutely.
And I strongly believe that the officers are the backbone of the organization.
Can you say that one more time?
The officers are the backbone of the organization. I strongly believe that because they are your first line of defense.
Absolutely.
And like I say, they have to be, everyone is not perfect, but they are the backbone. And they have to be good officers too. I mean, they have to be focused, on cue.
So let me interject for a second. When you say good officer, is a good officer one who does not disagree with administration? Does that necessarily make an officer bad because
That's
they
your
challenge?
conjecture. Well, no, a good officer is someone who's a team player, who's well, this is my opinion.
Okay.
This is my opinion. I don't look at any officer as being a bad officer.
Okay.
I'm writing a book called Preschool to Prison. That's the book I'm writing on now. And I'm on chapter 3. And doing the research, what I have found out that the reason why a lot of individuals go to prison, and it could be determined when they in preschool, is because of maltreatment, nutrition, and their environment. A lot of that has a lot in play. And so the point I'm trying to make is that back to being a good officer and a bad officer, I can't, when you say good officer, bad officer, because I don't know the makeup of that person. But I can say that I have some pretty good officers working for me, and I have some officers that I wouldn't call them bad, but I would say that they weren't giving me or giving the county, 80% or even sometimes 50%. So if you said those are one, if you want to put them in a category, I would say those that come to work only want to give 10 or 20%. Because I remember days when I was an officer and I was a prowler and I had to do everyone else's work. Not everyone, but I had to, do more than that was required of me to make sure the job get done.
Oh, I totally understand.
And that was tiresome.
I totally
get it. And so
if
you said, I would look at those officers probably as, if you're going to put them in a category, the one that only gave 20 or 30 or 40%. Now, the one that come and try to give 100% and could only give 40 or 50, they still good officers because they're trying to give.
Absolutely.
There could be other, impairments that cause them not to be able to give. Could be stress. It could be the working environment. It could be a lot of other things.
So let's talk about, you touched a little bit on stress. Let's talk about PTSD. PTSD, we oftentimes think that it's as a result of having been in the military. However, what about those officers who are in these environments each and every day, who are torn down by the system and are constantly put in situations that could potentially bring them harm, and when they bring it to the forefront, they're dismissed?
Now, you just asked 7 questions,
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
First, you have the acronym for
PTSD.
PTSD.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic, okay. So just ask me one question.
Sure. Okay, so getting back to post-traumatic.
And we're talking about people in general. We're not talking about Cook County.
Right.
Okay.
So a person being subjected to traumatic experiences every day, and then you compound that over 25, 30 years.
Okay.
And there is no exit program put in place when they leave, and there's no reentry program put in place when they've been put off work, and now they have to re-enter back into this environment. How does one deal with that?
Well, let me go back to the book Preschool to Prison.
Okay.
PTSD is also covered in those first two chapters as well. When you have babies and little kids that's suffering from PTSD and they're not being treated. And what happens is that a lot of them will eventually, grow out of it and won't have no long-term harm from it. But quite a few of them will. And when you put that in the mix with bad nutrition and everything else, that person usually, and then you throw some lead water in there and everything else, lead paint, that has an effect on the person. So when you in any situation, I think they just started doing this probably with the CPD, is that when a person's involved in a shooting, which is a PTSD, this is a traumatic situation, they take them off the streets. They usually leave them on the streets, and then next you know, that person involved in another shooting, another shooting. And so I think with any agency, if a person witness a serious incident of someone getting stabbed or seriously beat, it could be in a correctional facility anywhere, I think the people who experience that should get some type of counseling.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion. They
Absolutely.
should, they should talk to someone because I know, I think we're supposed to be tough and we're supposed to be able to endure that stuff. But when you suffer PTSD and you're not being treated and you continue to, experience and seeing all this trauma, even though it's not a shooting on the street, it's something that could be in a correction facility. And I think it's happened all over the country that every day officers experience not just officers, when I say officers, I mean all experience this, and there's no treatment. Of course, there could be some long-term effect from that. And at the same time, some people don't have problems, but there are some people that do.
Absolutely. Wow, unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Out of time?
Out of time. However, I would love to invite you back for part 2. That 1 hour just went so quick.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
So let's talk about your books and some of the things you have coming up.
Okay. The title of my books is Ghost of Hollandale, The American Genocide, Epiphany of Sin, Uncle Percy Blessing, The Malcolm X Project, Safer Jail and Prison Matter, Eagle Menak, which is suspense and thriller, and Preschool to Prison, which is currently being written. And one of the best way to, I think, for individual to handle life itself, I always tell people this is a story about a Native American Cherokee. This is a Native American Cherokee story about two wolves. Only one evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside of us all. One is evil, is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And the other wolf is good. It's joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee grandfather simply replied, "The one you feed."
On that note, I am Angela Champ for Sidestreets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. I want to thank you, Elvis Slaughter, for joining me
and
sharing.
Angela.
Thank you. And once again, if you are looking for an opportunity to host your own show here on IntellectualRadio.com, please do not hesitate to call 708-223-8953. And if you're hungry, it's because you must be fed. Until then.